Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. It's time for another edition of Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with Phil Putney and myself. And we're going to talk about, challenges for moving, especially as pre-retirees or retirees, and look at some things there. And we also, Phil, I've got this article that we were talking about, you and I, a little bit. And we tend to read articles, and they're very salacious. And there's one by Vanguard talking about how you can add like $100,000 to your retirement by doing some things within homes and home moving. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the challenges just in general that we face in that arena, especially in today's environment, but also whether something like this is really more salacious headline or plausible, right, kind of thing. Yeah. So that's the idea.
Unfortunately, we often read headlines, and that's the gist of what we pick up, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I can make $100,000 in retirement doing this. Wow, this is
right,
great.
Right.
I'm going to do that.
So let's look at it.
Even look at the article yet. So.
Yeah, right. So let's look at it and see what you think about it, as well as just talk about in general, right? Some of the challenges to think about. Unfortunately, there's a little thing happening on May 1st, which by the time we release this, it's already happened. But where they're kind of penalizing folks who are buying a house $400,000 or higher, and if you have I guess what they're calling a good credit score, which I didn't think mid-6s was good, but
right. I mean, that's okay.
Kind of weird, but basically, you could be looking at paying an extra $20 to $40 a month on your mortgage for those who don't have good credit, which. This is kind of that redistribution conversation.
I mean, anyone I've talked to, that just doesn't sit right.
It doesn't sit right.
I've done well.
Yeah.
Managed my credit well and, buying a house at this level, but yet you're going to now penalize me?
Yeah. And there was very little coverage of this. So very few people.
I've snuck under the radar.
I've talked to a few people about it. They're like, what? So this is another one of those things where they're sneaking stuff past us that we don't have our eye on the things we should because we're so caught up by salacious headlines, a lot of times political or whatever. So it's like we really got to kind of look at how we're doing things here, and it's not always the best. So. That's one hurdle that you might want to think about if you're thinking about moving, right, Phil? In the current environment, interest rates are higher.
You have to consider.
Accept that. So you're going to pay more for the house. Now you may pay more for this type of thing. So what's some other things to think about?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the article, the gist is, I could make $100,000 by selling my house and moving somewhere else, right?
Because house prices are still a little high.
House prices are high, absolutely. But I mean, at the end of the day, number one, you're selling high and buying high too, right? It's unless you're going to go stay in a tent somewhere for 2 years or whatever it takes.
If you're doing what my buddy's doing, living in his RV for 2 years, or his camper for 2 years.
I mean, even so, my brother-in-law and his wife are doing that.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's expensive.
It can be.
Look at what it costs to stay at campgrounds. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
For long term. So, I mean, that's not cheap either.
Right.
But so to the article's point, I mean, if you have the exact perfect scenario, it might work. I mean, if you were born and raised in California, taking it to the extreme, right?
Okay. All right.
And you bought into a market out there, $200,000 house, and now it's worth $1.5 million, right?
Right.
So you can sell that house, make a boatload of money, and now move to the Midwest and buy into a similar property at, a third or a quarter of the price, it could be a windfall. Absolutely. That may work for that scenario.
But that's tough. That's limited.
People, it's not going to work.
Yeah, that's limited, right?
It's very, very limited.
And to your point, like
specific scenario.
If you pocket $100,000 on the sale of your house after everything's paid for, and you got an extra $100,000, you're thinking, all right, I just added $100,000 to the bottom line. Again, where are you going to live, right? So if you go get a condo, let's say maybe you're thinking about doing that because you want a snowbird, right? So you're thinking about selling the main place. You're not going to do the two places. You're just going to move to the warmer climate. It's still going to cost you more. So you may spend that $100,000 anyway.
Right. I mean, just relocating, because this is a discussion I have with a lot of clients of, they consider relocating in retirement. Maybe it's because the kids have moved.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Their kids are now in different locations. They've got grandkids. They want to spend time with them. So they're going to relocate. Or maybe a job brought them to this area 20 years ago.
Right.
And now they're retiring and the rest of their family is in another part of the country and they want to relocate for that. That's fine.
Yeah.
Let's understand all the pros and cons and ins and outs of that scenario. What is the real estate environment or market that you're in currently, and where are you moving to?
And where are you moving to, right?
It may be similar. Even if it's similar, you're kind of swapping equity. It's never just a swap, because there's always expenses to buy and sell.
Is on
generally 10% is what we count is the cost of that transaction.
That's true, and it's easy to kind of like even a higher area. So like I was just talking with a gentleman the other day who came down to North Carolina, where I'm at, to for a conference or something like that, and he lives in New Jersey, which property and it's very expensive in New Jersey, right?
Higher,
And he's like, a lot of people move into Carolinas, right? He's like, you guys have been seeing a lot of. It's like, yeah, we've been seeing a lot of influx in North and South Carolina, and he's like, it's not as cheap there as I thought it was. So there's kind of also sometimes this mental misnomer that, well, I'm going to sell everything in New York or New Jersey and move to Tennessee, and it's cheaper, and also they have no income tax, and it may balance out, but don't kid yourself in thinking that it's going to just like you're going to have some windfall based off of it.
You do your research. And this is, again, where a financial advisor hopefully can help bring some value to that decision to walk you through all the different pieces in that. Because I have clients look at that all the time of, I'm going to move to Florida, right? There's no tax.
That's the big one, right?
We're paying tax at 4.25% in Michigan. But the thing to understand is every municipality, every state gets their tax revenue somewhere. Whether they call it income tax or they call it sales tax or they call it property tax. It's at the end of the day, they're going to get their revenue.
Walking your dog tax.
It's not free, So going to Florida, there's no income tax, but the sales tax is higher.
Yeah.
And municipalities have sales tax.
Yeah.
So by the time you add the state and municipality sales tax, you could be paying 6-7%.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're only, 6 here? So, you got to compare apples to apples. Where are we at?
Yeah, but
am
you
I
got
really
snow.
Gaining, anything at the end?
Yeah, but
and
you got
property taxes.
You got snow, and I'm willing to give up 2% for lack of snow.
Right. So there's pros and cons, but just approach it eyes wide open, right? Know all the different moving pieces to what this looks like.
Moving to Florida because you want the weather is certainly that's a different discussion. That's the bigger discussion than necessarily because they have no income tax.
No income tax, right?
Yeah, it could be a bonus. We talked about that. We did a podcast about that a while back, but it shouldn't be the one that wags the dog.
Right. Understand both sides of it. And the bigger piece, even in Michigan, so I work with clients all the time of. They're not planning on moving out of state, but they're going to relocate. Maybe they have currently a colonial. It's the house that they raised their kids in. Mm-hmm. You're getting older. You want everything on one level, right? You want to move to a ranch. That's great. The challenge that they face today is even if you're similar equity, right? You're going from a $400,000 house to a $400,000 house. Mm-hmm. In Michigan, at least, you're going to reset your property tax base. Because if you've been in your current house for 20 plus years, your property tax base is pretty low compared to the real value.
Okay.
But as soon as you sell and now you buy another one, you've reset the new property tax base at current value.
Oh.
So you might have, same value a house, all of a sudden added 20, 30, 50% to your property tax bill just because of that move.
Yeah.
And that's the rest of your life.
That's a great tip to note.
There's all these little pieces to consider when you're looking at moving. It's not just, I want to move here.
Yeah.
I want to downsize. I want to, whatever it is. Look at the whole picture financially.
This is taking a dark turn. I didn't intend it to, but that point that you just made, coupled with the one we started out with if your $400,000 house is the example, and you have a good credit score, you're going to be paying this extra fee that they're adding on now. And then coupled with higher interest rates right this minute because the interest rates are higher. All of a sudden,
maybe this doesn't work.
This may not be a good move, right? So it's, the idea is that you can see these headlines about how to this, that, or the other, but when you truly start to sit down and look at it, does it really make sense? And if you're back of the napkin, I guess, sort of math, and you're still getting there, it may be worth it to follow through with an advisor and say, okay, let's actually run some hard data before we make this decision, because what if we are wrong and something like the point you just made sneaks up on you and bites you right in the tush?
Right. I kind of liken this to rules of, general rules of retirement, the 4% rule, all these rules, right, that are out there. They're great back of the napkin sketch, kind of thumb in the air, am I on the right track scenario? Something to consider. Don't use it as you're planning.
Right.
Run the hard numbers, know the facts of how this works. You talked about condos, because that's often a discussion that comes up with clients is, hey, I'm getting older. I'd rather not maintain the yard and everything. I'm going to just go to a condo.
Yeah.
Could be a great option. Understand how that works, though, and what that association fee is. And you better dig into that a little bit more, because the challenge with association fees is, number one, it's not guaranteed. Secondly, there are so many of these condo associations that are underfunded.
For sure.
You're now in this condo 1, 2, 3 years, and the roads need to be replaced.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have enough in reserve, so here's a special assessment of $15,000.
Ouch.
Or whatever it is. I've got one client that has a condo in Illinois. Over the last 3 years, they've got assessments each year of $15,000 to $20,000 or $30,000.
Oh, yeah.
And
that wasn't
crazy.
expected. Yeah,
no,
that's certainly.
It wasn't part of the deal.
Yeah.
They're already paying this association fee.
Yeah.
This monthly HOA fee or condo association fee that's supposed to help pay for these, but the condo association didn't have enough reserves planned for some of these large expenses.
Right. And then they may find
have them done, and boom, here it is. You guys pay.
And then they find themselves, now digging into their retirement funds that was never planned for, and now you're going to have to maybe make some adjustments on this. So
now you got to get a second mortgage.
Yeah, for sure.
Home equity line. What do you do? Or to pull money out of retirement. there's
right.
So there's all these pieces to really understand. Everything sounds real good and rosy a lot of times up front. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not trying to shed a light on any
don't let
of this,
the headline lure you in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go into it eyes wide open. Understand all the math first.
We've talked before about like the fine print fiasco, which is sometimes you see this stuff and then you get into the fine print and you go, oh, okay. And this is it's similar, and also it's more like the headline fiasco. It's like, ooh, that sounds cool. Let's figure this out. And then you start diving in and you go, okay, well, maybe not so much.
Yeah, that wasn't as good as what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, so there's definitely challenges right now, folks, to moving. There's just the environment in general is not that great, right? For right now, it's more saving. It's a savers kind of market right this minute. Due to interest rates and things like that versus a borrower. So it's not necessarily the ideal time.
Yeah, again, not to say don't do it, because don't let interest rates deter you, because they're cyclical.
Sure,
right? You can get into something. Yeah, it might be a higher rate today. If markets do what they typically do, we should see interest rates over time start to decline, and you could always refinance out into a lower rate.
I'm just saying that's like one thing to weigh in along with
understand it going in up front that, hey, it could cost me more up front. Does that still work?
Yeah.
Can my budget, can my plan handle paying X amount more for the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, for sure.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah, for sure. So, there's just some basic challenges. We'll keep this one short and sweet because we went really long last week. But, there's just some basic challenges to moving. So don't be pulled in by headlines that say, you sell your house. I had the same thing. I literally had somebody stop by the house like 2 or 3 weeks ago, or just random. It's like, boy, talk about trying to generate business. The realtor comes by and says, I'd love to talk with you about your home. We did a quick evaluation, and just without even getting into it, we think that you could make easily $150,000 off the sale of your property. And I'm like, great, I have zero interest. Why are you at my door? Right. Or we see we see commercials, Phil, and these apps for things like Open Door. And things like that, where they're like, sell us your home today. You don't even have to deal with people, right? If you're in a major, larger market area, like the Metro Detroit area, for example, it might be a great resource, but they're just basically trying to say, hey, put your information in, we'll tell you what the house is worth, and you might see that number and go, ooh, let's sell it, right? I didn't realize it was worth that much, but make sure before you do, you plan all the other steps after. Don't be lured in by, just selling it because you might make 100 or 150 or even 200 grand off the sale of the house.
Right.
Is it going to cost you that or more if you do relocate? So that was the point of the podcast this week.
There's both sides of that equation. The front side looks really good. I'm making all this money, but on the backside, what does it cost me to actually do that? And we didn't even get into the quote unquote relocation cost. moving your stuff.
We can touch on it real quick, but yeah, I mean, that's another
the
one.
hassle of it. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a big deal. We moved 5 years ago now, and we've been at our house for 23 years. Mm-hmm. Oh my word.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I'm never moving again. So this is nuts. Where did all this stuff come from?
Do you remember the old George Carlin bit?
And I don't know how you are, but I need a place to put my stuff. So that's what I've been doing back there, just trying to find a place for my stuff. You know how important that is. That's the whole meaning of life, isn't it? Trying to find a place for your stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's
we accumulate over time.
we do. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be a great opportunity to just purge. My brother and sister-in-law, when they sold everything, moved into an RV. You talk about purging.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Nothing left. You're taking with you. They got a basement. It's a bus,
gone.
so they've got a basement, so to speak, where you can stick some things underneath it. But that's it.
Wow.
Not like a basement in a house. That's for sure.
That's for sure. So yeah. So just if you're thinking about moving, definitely run down all the lists, pros and cons for sure. Talk with your advisor. Talk with an advisor, especially for some of those hidden things that you may not be aware of that Phil highlighted this week on the podcast. They can certainly jump up and bite you. So make sure it's the right move. Like anything when it comes to finances and retirement, or just finances in general, not even just retirement, but just definitely think that look at both sides of it. It's not always the silver lining, and it's not always the doom and gloom. It can be somewhere in between. And if you need help, reach out to Phil at philstaxhacks.com. That's philstaxhacks.com. Subscribe to us on Apple, Google, YouTube, all that good stuff. And we'll catch you next time here on the show. Phil, thanks for hanging out, my friend.
Have a good week.
We'll see you next time on Phil's Tax Hacks and other retirement facts.
Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.
The idea is that you can see these headlines about how to this, that, or the other, but when you truly start to sit down and look at it, does it really make sense? And if you're back of the napkin, I guess, sort of math, and you're still getting there, it may be worth it to follow through with an advisor and say, okay, let's actually run some hard data before we make this decision, because what if we are wrong and something like the point you just made sneaks up on you and bites you right in the tush?
Right. I kind of liken this to rules of, general rules of retirement, the 4% rule, all these rules, right, that are out there. They're a great back of the napkin sketch, kind of thumb in the air, am I on the right track scenario, something to consider. Don't use it as you're planning.
Right.
Run the hard numbers, know the facts of how this works.